Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the E-Letter Functionality webinar. My name is Sean Amsbury, friendly neighborhood help desk guy, and I'm going to try to make this as painless as possible. It's a very detailed and somewhat in-depth group of things that have to happen all together. So we'll explore all those parts and then get some questions, and then going forward from there, that's why I'm at the help desk all the time. So don't be too daunted by the number of steps this takes to all go together. All right, so the first thing I really want to say is that when you're ready to start using this functionality in your site, it's going to be a real good idea to open a service desk ticket and ask for some help to get it going. There are a few things that have to be established just right, and a typo here and there, even a letter case difference, can make the difference between it working and not. And this thing either works all the way or it doesn't work all the way. And so getting those little details just right is going to make your success rate far greater. So don't be afraid to ask for help when you want to start using this. We're going to cover the E-Letter list. We're going to cover the templates, which are HTML files that the functionality of this looks at. There are two HTML files, one for email and one for the list view. We're going to look at the newsletter settings. Those are actually done by a third-party application that we've inserted into SharePoint as a setting, and we'll explore that. We'll look at the email and the viewer web part and the list item view. The last three are kind of our outputs to this thing. The first three are our input. The first goal of this is to have periodic emails sent to many recipients, and those emails are generated by the InfoWise newsletter setting and based on changes made to the E-Letter list. These terms that I use, like the E-Letter list, those are the default terms, and they can be changed. You can use, you can call the list Fred if you want to and use it, just making sure that your settings are pointed in the right direction. You can see on the screen here we've got examples of what it looks like when there's multiple changes or multiple new messages in an email, and what it looks like when there are single ones. Those can be sent out in any period, daily, weekly, every 30 days, whatever the settings will allow you to set. Our second goal is to have an index of these e-letter or newsletter items on a page. Our list viewer web part allows the index to build automatically based on the entries to that list. And then each of those list items in the index page is clickable, and it will it will result in a HTML page. It does not have anything on the page that you don't give it. So if you leave it the plain HTML wrapper, it will not look like an Oregon.gov page. It won't have the header, the footer. It won't have any navigation. That would be tough anyway. It'll simply be whatever HTML you tell it to render, or the HTML that is included in the default template. So how do we get to our end goals? We start with an E-Letter list. Again, this can be named anything out of the box. It's called E-Letter. And additions and edits to this list will drive the newsletters that are sent out via email as far as which list items are included in any given email. We have the newsletter settings. It's worth mentioning that this is a site setting, and so a site owner is going to have to be responsible for setting this up, maintaining it. After the email portion, this newsletter settings portion is established and it's running the way you want to, Then anybody with contribute access can add to that list or make changes in that list and make this thing go just from the list changing. And you can have multiple email profiles in this too. We'll look at that a bit later. So you can essentially you can set up more than one schedule for more than one different kind of newsletter if your agency has that need. And then we have the list viewer web parts in the page. This list viewer web part is very versatile. You can use it for a lot of different purposes. This is only one of them. Today we'll focus on this, and then there will be more discussions about different ways to use this in the future, and probably some more documentation about possibilities and ideas that people come up with. I love it when you guys think creatively and share it with us, because that gives us opportunity to document it and share it with everybody else so that we can make Oregon.gov a real exciting place to be. So we have our list, our web part, which is what builds the page. Once you put your web part in here and you set it, it will just continue to build this page according to the settings that you've made. And finally, we have the HTML templates. And you can, if you're familiar with HTML and familiar with CSS styling, you recognize this. If you're not, then that's okay. No problem there. The default templates will work, and if you have very simple things that you want changed, we can help with that. You will notice that there are double bracketed tags in the HTML here. Those are the critical pieces that have to be just right in this template. In fact, yesterday I was pulling my hair out for about an hour and a half because something all of a sudden wasn't working. And a developer I went to for help pointed out to me that I had gone to a previous version of one of these templates that I'd uploaded for a different purpose, and it had a typo in it. It wasn't exactly the same as the list columns. So that's the kind of thing that can drive you nuts for a little bit. But these double bracketed tags are what makes this template bring in the correct column value for this display. And again, this is what drives this kind of a view in your list item view, and what drives emails that get sent out. So everything is really interrelated. The first thing I guess we'll talk about is in your site, wherever it is that you'll be establishing this, you will want to give yourself an E-Letter list. That's what that would look like. And then somewhere in the site, you'll want newsletter templates. Now this is, there's two. I called it something a little different. We came up with a different naming convention to make things easier. But your templates will need to go in a library. And again, it's not as critical what this library is called as that you keep track of it and call it the same thing in your web part settings and in your newsletter settings. And so these are the two things that are visible in this view, in the View All Site Content. You'll have a library for your templates, and alternatively, you could put it in a folder in your Docs library or Documents library or what have you, just so that you can keep track is the most important part. Where are these things and what are their names? And once we get there, there are two that are default: E-Letter email template and E-Letter list viewer template. Again, those are both HTML documents, and they can be downloaded and changed by you folks and re-uploaded under a different name, presumably, so that you've always got the good one to go back to. And then you can use those HTML templates under the new name and point your web part or your newsletter setting at them. So the templates need to be there. They are available on GovSpace. The out-of-the-box templates are available. They're in the eGov training space, and they are under a category called SharePoint Resources. So if you want to do this all yourself, you feel confident in doing that, they are available for you. They can also be downloaded from there or copied. I put the text of it in there too. And you can start manipulating them from there if you want to, start playing with different designs if you like. So aside from that, if you want to do this yourself, you would not have an e-letter templates there, and all you would do as a site owner, you have a little create button, and you tell SharePoint that you want to create a library, and you're going for a document library. And for me, I'm going to call this, I believe I call it e-letter templates, but the spelling is a little bit different here than it is in my test site. And that's all there is to creating a library. You'll see it pop up here in my view in a second. This is my new library, and it is ready to add documents to. I just go to my drive, choose a file, and upload it. And that's where you'll be looking for that HTML template after you download it and do what you need to do to make it yours. Go back out to view all site content, and you can see I now have this e-letter templates library that I just created. That's as simple as that. It's not too tough to do. So create the library, upload the templates, or call the service desk, have us do it. And then the e-letter list is a piece that will need to, if you're going to use the out-of-the-box templates, the e-letter list needs to be created exactly as is described in the documentation. We'll go over that right now, but you do always have the reference, the e-letter documentation on GovSpace, the PDF, outlines this in detail so that you always have a reference beyond this little video. So in order to go through that, we have to, again, as a site owner, you have create, and you'll want to create a list. You want to create the custom list and call it, for the most part, you're going to want to call this e-letter like that, but since I already have one and I want to lead you through this, I'm going to call it e-letter A, just to make it different from my existing one that works. All right, now we have the e-letter list. We're looking at the list. There's nothing here yet. And so what we want to do is we need to add columns. Again, this is detailed in that document on GovSpace. I am going to go through a few of them just to show you what we're looking at. So when we go, we're looking at the list itself here, the contents of it. There's nothing in there. And we do list settings. And you see by default, here in the columns section, we have 3 default columns. One of them is title, one of them is created by, and one of them is modified by. These are default. They stay there. They identify the list item as minimally as SharePoint can. Excuse me. What we need is to add columns to this, and so we're going to create a column called name, because that's one of the values that we pull in with the HTML template. Name must be a single line of text. You don't have to have these required, but understand that if you do not have all of these columns filled in, that the settings and the list view will both break. Enforced unique values, I would advise not doing that because you may have, a newsletter of the same name. Max characters is not real important. Just understand that it's there and it is enforced by SharePoint. So if you have there are reasons for very long names, you may want to bump this out, or you may want to control it more stringently and have it be shorter than 255. Up to you entirely. And the default text, if you have a specific word or group of words that you want to have set in that column, then you could enter it here. I don't generally set that because my needs are all over the place for the words and titles and things. Once you have all these things set, you can see how many different choices you have for the type of column, and that's why I'm going to do a few of these. We need a few different types, and these settings change depending on which type you choose up here. And so this one, the name column, is done. So we click OK, and when we get back to the list settings, you see that we have the name column here. It's been a single line of text. It is required. And if I go back to the list view, you'll see that I have name now up here in the header, whereas before I only had title. And so as we continue to add things, going back to list settings, here's our view of the columns. I'm going to create a new column. And this time, I'll show you one that's a little bit different. Let's do image URL. Notice my capitalization there. In order for that template to work, it has to be exactly that because that's the way the template calls it. Capital I and a capital U, the rest are all lowercase. If I didn't do it that way, the template would miss it. This is going to be considered a hyperlink or picture by SharePoint, and you see that our column settings changed to now offer something appropriate to the hyperlink or picture list type. Column type, excuse me. This is a column type. Again, require that it contains information. Well, you might not always have an image that goes with your newsletter, but again, if your HTML template calls for an image and there is no image specified, then where the image is supposed to be, it will show up as a broken image. Alternatively, in some cases, it could show up with those square brackets and the word image URL displayed in the template that people see. If you want the ability to have an image in it, then I would suggest at least having a default image, even a white spacer image, if you're not always going to have a picture that goes along with the article. Alternatively, you could have your agency logo and then be able to swap that out if you wanted to with a different image if it goes with your newsletter. There's lots of ways to get around it. Just understand that if there is no image called in this column, that it will show up broken in some way, shape, or form. And since this is an image URL, we're calling it that, we want this to be of a type picture. And that way our image will show up as an image rather than as a URL of the image, because our other choice is hyperlink. Click OK. And we've got our image URL as included. We can do another one, call it body. Oops. This is where the body text would go. This is going to be multiple lines of text, and we want this to be plain text in the body. If the body is rich text, then it will actually show some of the HTML tags that make up this rich text here. There is a way to get around that. You could add a new column, yet another column called teaser or something along those lines that is a plain text column with just 2 sentences or so of a teaser for the story. And then in your template, you add an area for that story column that has the whole story in it, then that can be rich text, and it'll show up just fine in that column or in that template that you show. If you want to do something like that, give me a call. I haven't written up the instructions for it yet, but I can help you get that done. And that way you can have a full HTML page in your newsletter with links, with images, tables if you need them, what have you, and not break the list view on the page that shows all of these newsletter items. So just it's another way to use this and expand that template a little bit. In fairly short order, that template will be available on GovSpace. That's one that we really recognize the need for. So anyway, once I get this done, number of lines for editing, you can choose that as very few, or you can choose it as a lot. Just depends on how big your newsletter is going to be. That changes to existing text, no, and then add default to yes. And now we have a body column right here. And so you can see it's not real tough, but it is tedious to get those columns correct. So let's go look at a list that already has some entries in it. The E-Letter list is the one that we've used in this site. As you can see, because I chose the picture in that list column, this shows up as an actual image. If I had chosen hyperlink, what you would see here instead of an image is the actual URL to the image if I had chosen hyperlink. And so it's very important to choose picture in that one. And these are just various little blurbs of Lorem Ipsum and images that I had on my machine. You can see what the list looks like having been filled out. Adding to this list is just the same as adding to any other list. We use either the add new item at the bottom or new item in the ribbon. Oh, I had this set up differently, didn't I? Okay. Department of Newsletters. New item. Let's see. Body text of the new. And image URL. This is one of the reasons I always have more than one tab open to the site that I'm working in, because I need to go pick up an image URL. So I'm going to go to my images library and just copy link address. I click on the name of the image and copy link address. That'll give me the URL. If I right-click on the image itself, it'll give me a URL to the thumbnail, which requires authentication, and that'll come up as a broken image. And so always, when you do it this way, right-click on the name of the image and copy link address. That will give you the URL to the actual image that's published. These do have to be published, by the way. Images that are not published will come up as broken. And then the category name. This is a method by which the list will allow you to filter in the list viewer web part, and also in the email settings. So once we have the list done, then we'll go look at that email setting. And here's my new item. So adding to this list, that's all there is to it. When you add to the list, or when you go back and amend existing list items, those are generally triggers to say that, okay, email settings, I want you to include these items in the new email going out. They're brand new or new and amended since the last date. Since the last date of sending the email. clarify that. So that's the list. It's not tough. It just has to be exact as far as the column names go. Okay, now we've talked about the templates. We've talked about the list. The next piece that has to go into play here is the email settings for this all to work together. So we're going to go to Site Actions. Again, this is a site setting, and so you will need to be a site owner in order to set up the email portion of this. The rest of it, contributors can handle, but the email portion will need to be set up by a site owner. All right. Once we get into our site settings page, you'll notice that sites now have a new option here under Site Administration called InfoWise Managed Newsletters. InfoWise is the third-party company, and Managed Newsletters is what we're doing with this setting. So we click into that and find something with a bit different of a look and feel than most of SharePoint. That's because this is actually a plugin from a different company, so this is the way it's supposed to look. You can see here that I have two profiles up here already, and so you can see you can have multiple profiles. Each of these profiles can filter for a different subset of newsletters. In fact, from different lists if you want them to. So you could actually have more than one series of newsletters in either the same list and just filter for them, or in different lists and filter in the lists. So let's look at these settings. We have general settings. The name of this, this is not the name necessarily of the newsletter, but the name of the profile. And it will show up in the end product of the email. Just to make it a little different, you go, sample newsletter. Now my site URL, that's my site. That's the site and sub-site that I'm actually working in. This is important because this is going to tell the setting where to look for the possible lists to pull from. And so if I were to push this up and tell it to look in agency training, my top test site, and then click out of it, you can see it's working there, spinning at the top. And it has just reset itself to now look at the lists from that top, from the top site. If I go back and look in the site I'm in now and click out, I'll get the list that I expect. Now, there's nothing wrong with pulling from a different site, within your site collection, of course. The site URL is what's going to determine which lists are shown for choices, and I'm going to choose the E-Letter list. And what that choice did was change the possible columns that I have to choose from down here. So this is totally reactive or responsive. The site will determine the lists that are available. The list that is chosen will determine the columns that are available, because this setting knows what kind of column it wants to see for a title, for a body, category, image, and so forth. The owner is going to be, by default, you. You can add more users to it if you want to. If you share ownership on this, then you can certainly do that. Add your other users to it. Items. This setting is going to determine which items in the list are included in, chronologically, the next newsletter email sending. And so typically, you're probably going to want to automatically include items that have been added or modified since the last send date. That means if there's been updates on previous newsletters or new newsletters since then, new list entries, you'll want to include those things to your public viewers. Or you can set up filtration and searching here, automatic, not dynamic searching. In other words, it doesn't allow the end user to search. It's this application searches list and then comes up with the result. Include items according to the following conditions, where a specific, only those things where a specific column value equals, or any of these variables, a specific string. You may have special circumstances where that would apply. Typically, these are public updates. You'll want to update them about changes and about new stuff as opposed to very specific, as opposed to being based on very specific column values. But, again, this is one of those filtering tools where if you had more than one series of newsletter, you could say, okay, well, everything that's, everything where the title contains George gets sent. And if it's important for you to have them receive, all list entries every time, that's the way it would do it. You would add that, and then you would have an opportunity to do more. Title, this up here, this line is where if I would have made an entry here in this box, it would be up here. This would be your first condition, and then this would be your second condition. So you could actually do that, okay, so it was created greater than and a certain date or whatever. You can see that this could go a long ways into filtration and very specific things being sent to a list of email recipients. By and large, the way I imagine this being used is that you would automatically send modifications and new items to your viewers. Sort order. You would view all items, and they would be sorted. If you want to use this, you can use it to sort by date or according to the view of the list that you've set. So I would say that generally speaking on a newsletter, you're probably going to want to sort them in the email. In other words, what's on top, what's on bottom, what's on, what's in the middle, by a modified date. To say that, well, here's the January one, here's the February one, here's the March one. And so this is the way you can have those things sorted. Columns, this is where your individual column values are going to get called into this setting so that the template can use them. And so the title column is going to be either title or name, doesn't really matter. You just have to be consistent in remember the way you've done this. One of the things I would recommend on this is to get this set up, and then once you have your profile up here, test it, and just put you as a recipient. We'll get into that. And if you test it and say, well, that's not quite right. Okay, which entry was that? Have your email open next to your settings, then you can you can be very sure about how this thing is going to display. And it would only take a little while to get it right. So your title is going to be either title or name. Your body column is going to be, in this case, the body title column, the column titled body, and the category. Now in this list, again, this was before we came up with the current naming convention that we're exposing. This would be category name, because that's what's in my list right now for category. Image column, it recognizes that there's only one column that's available to be a picture, so it automatically just gives that as your only one there. You do want to, if I recall correctly, let me check this. You do want to choose to embed images as attachments. If you don't, they will not render properly in the HTML template. So the columns setting is probably your second most important setting on the thing. The first being that you're calling from the correct site and the correct list. Next is recipients. This is a little counterintuitive. You go down here in the middle of the setting first, and you can either just add your current user, which is going to be you as an author in SharePoint, or a specific list of users. We haven't run into a physical limit. If you've got a bunch of people on a list, my guess is they're going to be on some kind of a listserv or a third-party mailing list through iContact or some different list manager, so that you're not having to manually manage a list of emails, because these will not be SharePoint groups for sure. They're going to be people that you're sending this out to, and those folks are going to need a way to subscribe to a list. And so you can use that email address from whatever listserv you're using. You can include individual email addresses, and you can include SharePoint user addresses. For now, when you first set it up, I would suggest using current user and maybe one or two other people if you're looking for feedback for the way you're arranging things and all that. And then once you've tested it out right, then you can add your listserv or list of email users. People in the contact list, this users would be SharePoint users if you're going to email to other users that have a SharePoint account. And then email addresses would be one at a time. You're going to go in here and add somebody's at Comcast.net or at Earthlink.net or at whatever, and then add to. So right now I'm just going to put myself, I'm going to choose current user and add to. And this feature here is misaligned a little bit. You can see that I'm in there. It's just tough to actually see that. I'm not quite sure why that is. I've reported it to them, and hopefully they'll come out with some kind of an update that will align that a little better for us. But you can see that it's there. And then you can also have a never send to, where this is essentially a blocker of the email addresses. Oh, and you can also establish your sender display name as well. These will always come from this email address because SharePoint is already set up to allow this sender email address through. And then the sender display name, you can put that as whatever you want to represent your agency, your project, your whatever it is that your newsletter is associated with. You can identify it that way. And then recurrence down here towards the bottom, this is where you're going to schedule the e-letter to go out every day after, let's say, 10 items have been added or edited. weekdays, and you're going to do, okay, every Friday, or up here, every 30 days, what have you, doesn't matter. And then what send out time do you want? Midday is probably the worst you can do for send out time, especially if your list is large. If you have a very large list, I would suggest sometime in the early morning hours. But that's not as important as just getting it out anyway. And so you can schedule it any way you want to here. You can also call a newsletter active or inactive. That way, if you're inactive, if you don't have this chosen, then you can go up to your profile here in the top. And these are both under some kind of a test condition. But when this is added, you have a run condition, in which case you can manually run these whenever you want to as well. Your mail server settings need to remain unchecked. Do not use SharePoint outgoing mail server settings. That will throw a red flag to SharePoint, not allowed to send anything, and so it will give you an error that says that your letter was not sent. Once you're finished, you click Add, and then watch for eGov Sample Newsletter. That's our title for this profile. I'm going to click Add. And now we have 3 up here instead of 2, and one of them is the eGov Sample Newsletter. And you can see here, there's that Run button I was talking about. So this one, if I remember correctly, edit, verify this before I say it. That's active and it still allows for that. So let's call it inactive. Okay. Okay. So this is not an actively scheduled newsletter now. In other words, it's not going to run automatically. And if you want it to run, then you can send it by clicking Run. And so in my email, just as a live example, here is what was sent to me. Because this is a new profile, it's never seen any of those list items before. This is what was sent to me, including all of the list items, because they're all new to that profile. And so that's what your email looks like. Again, this is with the default template. You see where the categories come in. Here's a category. Red is one of my categories. Top here, blue is one of my categories. You can see how those group things together. Okay, so that is an overview, anyway, of the email functionality. That can actually stand alone. It does not have to have the index page associated with it. This is a somewhat advanced idea, or at least an intermediate idea, and so I'm going to skip the whole here's how you create a page part of this. And what we will do is get into editing a page. I'm going to show you where this web part lives. You may or may not be able to see the web part right off the bat. This part of this is a feature that needs to be turned on for sites, and we did run a script to do that. It may not have worked perfectly, depending on different variables for your site. And so if you don't see this, what we're looking for is the Oregon Custom Web Parts category and the List Viewer Web Part. It should be available, but if it's not, don't panic, just let us know it's not, and we will get it there for your site. That works like like any other web part, you just put your cursor on the page where you want it to go, and it will show up. You can either put it in the, like I do, in the article content area, or you can put it in the actual web part area of the page. Once you have the web part on there, it won't look like this. It does not automatically draw this in. It just looks like the, it looks like that. Okay? Putting the web part on the page does not do anything automatically. You have to configure this web part. And so we will want to open it to edit. And again, this is another one of those pieces that has to be done just right in order for it to work properly. So here are the properties of the web part. We have the site URL, which if you leave it blank, it will draw the list from your site. This is very similar to the email setting. If the site that's named here in this field is going to determine which lists are offered in this drop menu. Okay? And so if you leave this blank, it will automatically draw from the site or subsite that you happen to be in at the time. In this case, we are in the subsite George under agency training. Okay? So this is looking at the lists in the George subsite. And we specifically want the E-Letter list. We want various columns in that list. And so we just select these just like you do in Windows Explorer. It's just a simple control-click to select multiple columns. And whatever columns are highlighted are going to be a part of the view over here in the page that the web part shows you. The one thing that you should remember is that the view of this list is not designed to show the image in the index. This is strictly for making these things available to your viewers. Images can take up a lot of space. They can throw alignment off depending on the shape and size and all that. And so this viewer web part is not designed to pull in the image that's associated with your list. Don't try that one. It won't work right. And again, we can have these being ordered by a specific type column. Okay. So if they were created, not by, but created, that would be a date. Which direction are they going to be sorted? Grouping by the whatever they're going to be grouped by. You can group these by different column values. In which case, if you have enough of them being shown, well, if you have different column values being being grouped, then if you have items in the list that use those group values, they will be displayed as grouped items in the web part. I'm not sure if I have enough different ones here. I think I do to show that. Filter date, you can either turn on or off. If you want to use a filter date, it is a matter of being either from modified or from created and a start and finish date. What this does is it limits the date range of the items that will be shown over here. Some lists can grow, huge, and maybe on this page you only want to show the lists from this year. And so you're, on January 1st, you get in and say, okay, well, now we're going to show the list items from 1/1/2015 to 12/31/2015. You can either use it or not. the date fields do not activate unless they are being used. So if I go back and say that I don't want that, I leave that blank, the date fields go away. So that's up to you to be able to filter by date. The tag column that you're going to want to use, you can add a column to this list called tags, and then these will be filtered. The things shown here will be filtered by the tag that you specify their values here. Something very much like the content query web part is what we are looking at here. We're telling it where to look, and then we're telling it exactly what to look at. You can limit the number of rows, and then here's where that template comes in. This needs to be pointed at the template in the library that we uploaded it to before. Remember, we had the E-Letter templates library that had the two templates in it. And so the way we do that, again, this is why I have multiple tabs open when I edit in SharePoint. We want this to be our address in there. And so I right-click, copy link address, and then paste that in here as a relative URL. And so what happens is when we paste that, the whole fully qualified URL lands in there. This actually wants a relative URL. And so we've already pointed it. It already knows that it's in the agency training site. So it needs to see from George on, from the current site on, in the path to that HTML document. This is detailed in the PDF document on GovSpace. The appearance, in these kinds of things, I would normally let the title of the page do its job and tell people what's going on the page, and set the Chrome type to none, because that's what we're talking about here is the appearance. I don't want to see this title list viewer web part, and I also don't want to see words on this page that are styled like that. It doesn't fit. You're more than welcome to choose, any of those Chrome types, and if you do, then we could do this. And change this. You'll see that will change in just a few minutes. Down here, just like most other web parts, you may have a reason to specify a height and width. I generally will leave those for the content of the web part to determine, either that or the width of the page. Okay, so it looks like we have successfully set all these settings correctly, and we will click. Web parts are funny. You can click apply and OK and still not see the changes that you really want to see until, expand this again, until you check in the page. That one worked the first try. Cool. So here you can see we've established all of our criteria for what's going to be displayed. We set this thing up to group by the category name here. And so here's what that looks like. You've got these category names, minor colors, that you can expand or contract in the list view. And so this will help your users or your viewers to be able to quickly get to what they want. That and the page search feature in their browser. But this is kind of a, for different purposes, this can be a neat tool. And that will work the same regardless of what column you specify as the group by column as long as you have various items that use the same value in that column, then they will successfully group like this according to that column. So once we're done with that, by the way, the layout in advance, just like most web parts, these don't do much, and they have the potential, if you do have the expertise to use these, they have the potential of breaking the web part if they're not used right. And so we'll click OK to get rid of that, bring our web part back, and I'm going to save and close. All right, now you can see we have a live page, live looking page anyway. This is how it would look on Oregon.gov. I do have that because I set it to have this dual title on there. Again, typically I don't. I'll just say no Chrome and take that away. And we have clickable pieces because we installed that template link. Each of these links in the title of the list item will open up that list item in this HTML template. So you see how that works. Again, these templates are editable. You can do what you like with them. The website template or the web page template is going to be easier to deal with than the email template. Emails have some interesting restrictions and things. I don't pretend to be an expert on email. This view is going to be much easier to make fancy looking than the email view. Again, this can be used independently of the email portion. It is a good tool for viewing lists, information that you want to keep in lists so that it can be categorized and reused, and whatever it is you want to do with it, and maintain a list instead of an HTML page. And so this would be a very useful tool. In fact, I have one person who is interested in using this in a slightly different way to display some documents that are of need on the website. So this is very versatile.
Sean, this is Liz. I do have a question.
Great.
I'm wondering about how this will display in the new V4 template, like with font and style and, the example we're looking at right now. Would it look exactly the same in the V4? So if you were to reduce down that index page we were just looking at to a mobile device, it's set up sort of like a table, so would that respond well? I'm just wondering how that might look. So.
Good question. So you can see the styling is very similar. And we go down. He did build that in. What do you know? What a nice guy. Okay, so yeah, it'll scrunch down. It won't always be comfortable to read, but it'll scrunch down and actually display.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. And then when you actually click into one of these, you could amend the template to display fonts, colors, what have you, that you want to match your V4 site.
Okay. So it sounds like template absolutely is editable, customizable, but the web part display in the index is what it is.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Okay, good question. Thank you. I hope this has been informative and helpful. I'm available. This is a fairly new feature, so by all means, give me a call if you need help, and if I don't know answer, I will get it for you. And let's see what kind of fun we can have with this E-Letter thing, because it's a lot bigger than just E-Letter, and we might be able to have some fun. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, and I hope you all have a great day.